everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Macabre. We're here with your host. It's not just Jiffy, it's Jacob Peanut Butter.
I like that. That was my faithful host, Crunchwrap Supreme, Carlito. And yeah, we've got a pretty fun episode today, but the first thing you may notice is that you're looking not at us, but at something else. We don't have video for this episode, and it's probably something that we're going to be off of for a little while. But Carlito, why don't you fill the Maccabees in on what's going on?
Yes, so my faithful old webcam broke, and our webcam actually is malfunctioning, and it's not currently working right now. If you want to support your favorite podcast, aka hopefully us, you can now like subscribe for like 99 cents and like $4 and things like that on Spotify and on Patreon, and I believe even on Apple. So if you want to head over there and support your podcast so we can keep doing what we love and bringing you guys new content, and then maybe even get us that new webcam, we can go back to our videos and our YouTube. But for the time being, we're just going to bring you our stories with the smooth sound of our voices.
Yes. And honestly, I don't mind just doing it like this. It's
yeah.
like we're all just sitting around a room
chill.
Telling stories. Like this week's story. It's something that I feel very passionately about, and I'm really excited to share. I'm calling it The 9 Deaths of Edgar Allen Poe. What do you think of that?
Whoa, Poe.
Yeah. Kind of like 9 lives, but it's 9 deaths.
And he would be a cat.
Yeah.
If he wasn't a human.
Not like a raven.
Oh my gosh. You're right. I'm so sorry. He would definitely be a raven.
Yeah.
And then a cat.
So the reason I bring this up is that there's a lot of mystery still to this day around Edgar Allan Poe's death. As a matter of fact, there are actually 9 main theories as to his actual cause of death. So that's basically what we're going to get into, and hopefully we can talk about maybe what you think happened, what I think really happened. But like I said, it's shrouded in mystery. So,
and we love a good spooky story.
Yes. So if you don't mind, folks, just sit right down, buckle up, and listen to my sweet voice. Okay.
Self-proclaimed sweet voice.
Yeah. It was raining in Baltimore on October 3rd, 1849. But that didn't stop Joseph W. Walker, a compositor for the Baltimore Sun, from heading out to Gunners Hall, a public house bustling with activity. It was election day, and Gunners Hall served as a pop-up polling location for the 4th Ward polls. When Walker arrived at Gunners Hall, he found a man, delirious and dressed in shabby second-hand clothes, lying in the gutter. The man was semi-conscious and unable to move. But as Walker approached him, he discovered something unexpected. The man was Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, the man himself.
Oh, Poe.
Walker stopped and asked Poe if he had any acquaintances in Baltimore who might be able to help him. Poe gave Walker the name of Joseph E. Snodgrass, a magazine editor with some medical training, immediately. Walker wrote Snodgrass a letter asking for help. And here's the letter. I've got the letter.
Oh, I love letters.
Yeah. Baltimore City, October 3, 1849. Dear Sir, there is a gentleman, rather the worse for wear, at Ryan's 4th Ward polls, who goes under the cognomen of Edgar A. Poe, and who appears in great distress. He says he is acquainted with you. He is in need of immediate assistance. Yours, in haste, Joseph W. Walker, to Dr. J. E. Snodgrass.
Wait a minute. So, are they waiting for him to send, like, money for help? Or are they waiting for, like, what is they what is the expectation from
I
Miss
guess
Dr.
just
Snodgrass?
like come take him to a physician, take him to wherever he needs to be because he's just out in the streets right now, I guess.
That's so polite because in my head, in this time period, they would just walk straight past someone laying on the street. Because also in my head, this is the time of the bubonic plague, but I could totally just be making that up.
Could be. Yeah. It's not that, but
Well, I think of Poe and I think of darkness and death
Yeah.
and things. That's why.
yeah, it wasn't the Black Plague though.
Right.
But so check this out. On September 27th, almost a week earlier, Poe had left Richmond, Virginia, bound for Philadelphia to edit a collection of poems for Marguerite St. Leon Loud, a minor figure in American poetry at the time. When Walker found Poe in delirious disarray outside of the polling place, it was the first anyone had heard or seen of the poet since his departure from Richmond. Poe had never made it to Philadelphia to attend his editing business, nor did he ever make it back to New York, where he had been living, to escort his aunt back to Richmond for his impending wedding. Poe was never to leave Baltimore, where he launched his career in the early 19th century again. And in the 4 days between Walker finding Poe outside the public house and Poe's death on October 7th, he never regained consciousness enough to explain how he had come to be found, in soiled clothes that were not his own, incoherent on the streets. Instead, Poe spent his final days wavering between fits of delirium, gripped by visual hallucinations. Jeez. That was a hard one to say, I guess.
Oh, I was going to say, aren't those the same thing?
Well, you can have auditory hallucinations.
Oh, yeah. You schooled me on that one. You're right.
I've always been curious, if you were blind your whole life, like born blind, I wonder what it looks like if you take like shrooms or acid or something.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but I did just read a full medical report on a study they did that people with schizophrenia, the chances of someone who is blind having a schizophrenia is almost none. Almost none. And most schizophrenic hallucinations usually have eyes in them. So isn't that weird?
Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Because it's all like what you see. It's a very visual thing.
Yeah, it's peculiar.
Peculiar.
So, back to Poe here. He was gripped by visual hallucinations and delirium. The night before his death, according to his attending physician, John J. Moran, Poe repeatedly called out for Reynolds, a figure who, to this day, remains a mystery. Who the heck was he calling out to?
That's
Reynolds.
my best friend's family's last name, Sam. It was probably her great.
Are they from Baltimore, Richmond, New York area?
I'll have to ask them.
Ask him. Reynolds. Poe's death, shrouded in mystery, seems ripped directly from the pages of one of his own works. He had spent years crafting a careful image of a man inspired by adventure and fascinated with enigmas. A poet, a detective, an author, a world traveler who fought in the Greek War of Independence and was held prisoner in Russia. But though his death certificate listed the cause of death as phrenitis, or swelling of the brain, the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death have led many to speculate about the true cause of Poe's demise. And here's a quote from Chris Sempner, the curator of the Poe Museum in Richmond, which I've actually been to. Yeah. So here's what he says. Maybe it's fitting that since he invented the detective story, he left us with a real-life mystery. Yeah, I mean, it does make sense.
It went full circle.
Literally, he is credited, a lot of people don't know this, with inventing the detective novel. Like even before Sherlock Holmes
Yeah.
was Edgar Allan Poe, where you've got a guy who's smart, who investigates clues and solves a crime. That's Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Thank him for all of
Literally
that.
the king of this genre.
Yeah. So now we're going to get into the 9 different theories, okay? Are you ready?
Yes.
The first one, beating, as in beaten to death.
Okay.
What?
No, I'm just processing why that would cause, like, how the hallucinations and the clothes swap and the other stuff
Well,
would correlate with that. Like the brain swelling, maybe?
yeah. In 1867, one of the first theories to deviate from either the phrenitis or alcohol was published by biographer E. Oakes Smith in her article, Autobiographic Notes, Edgar Allan Poe. So check this out. This is a quote
Okay.
from biographer E. Oakes Smith. At the instigation of a woman who considered herself injured by him, he was cruelly beaten, blow upon blow, by a ruffian who knew of no better mode of avenging supposed injuries. It is well known that a brain fever followed.
Oh, fever. A brown fever? A brain fever sounds excruciating.
Yeah, I don't think I'd like that. Other accounts also mention ruffians who had beaten Poe senseless before his death. Eugene Didier wrote in his 1872 article, The Grave of Poe, that while in Baltimore, Poe ran into some friends from West Point who prevailed upon him to join them for drinks. Poe, unable to handle the liquor, became madly drunk after a single glass of champagne, after which he left his friends to wander the streets. In his drunken state, he was robbed and beaten by ruffians and left insensible in the street all night. So
what is the alcohol content of champagne? Like 1?
I don't know. Well, odds are he was probably drinking more than that. Like, who knows?
Yeah, 1 glass seems like quite the stretch. And also, I was gonna ask you, like, wasn't he a penniless poet? Like, he was known for being kind of poor too.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't like wealthy and famous, but he still like went to West Point and had like a military career and stuff.
I just thought that his fame didn't happen until he was long gone.
Oh, literarily, yeah, totally.
Okay.
Like,
and
but he was
so
still
these
somewhat...
ruffians wouldn't have known who they were messing with. So. It wasn't like a personal thing, like he didn't have enemies.
No. Well, we'll get into more.
Perfect.
More theories. But that's like beatings. Just
right.
He was drunk, acting a fool, walking around, and a bunch of ruffians beat him up. And then later on, he succumbed to injuries that were related to that.
Related to that, yeah. Okay.
So number 2, this one's called cooping, which I think is kind of interesting. So others believe that Poe fell victim to a practice known as cooping, a method of voter fraud practiced by gangs in the 19th century where an unsuspecting victim would be kidnapped, disguised, and forced to vote for a specific candidate multiple times under multiple disguised identities.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is, like, really something that's always happened then, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought voter fraud was, like, more...
Nope. I imagine it was probably easier to get away with back then.
Yeah, because they didn't have photographic IDs.
No.
Like, show me your ID. You can't.
Yeah. Well, apparently it was extremely common in Baltimore around the mid-1800s.
What were they voting for back then? Or, I mean, who? I was trying to think of who.
Politicians.
I know politicians. I was trying to think of who would have been the politicians.
Well, like who was the running for mayor and
like who would have been someone to note of like
I don't know.
They must have really been striving for that. That's a crazy one. I don't think that's unbelievable though.
Yeah.
All right, continue.
Well, the site where Walker found Poe was a known place that Coopers often brought their victims.
That would explain the change of clothes.
And the fact that Poe was found delirious on election day then is not...
With brain swelling?
Yeah, with brain swelling.
Yeah, that makes perfect... this, to me, so far, I'm going with this one. Okay. Out of 3 so far, but let's hear the rest.
Well, over the years, the cooping theory has come to be one of the more widely accepted explanations for his strange demeanor before his death.
Was Reynolds running for a political office?
I don't know. I doubt it. They would probably linked that.
Yeah, they would have linked it by now.
But
you're right.
Before Prohibition, voters were given alcohol after voting as a sort of reward.
So he probably voted 6 times and got...
So had he been forced, exactly, to vote multiple times in a cooping scheme, that might explain why he was drunk.
He was wasted.
Yeah. Around the late 1870s, Poe's biographer J.H. Ingram received several letters that blamed Poe's death on a cooping scheme. A letter from William Hand Brown, a member of the faculty at Johns Hopkins University, explains that the general belief here is that Poe was seized by one of these gangs, his death happening just at election time, an election for sheriff, which took place on October 4th. So that answers that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Cooped, quote, cooped, like as in taken, beaten up, stupefied with liquor, dragged out and voted, and then turned adrift to die. So that's
really sad.
Yeah, so that's mainly the second theory. Now, idea number 3, kind of a simplification.
Okay.
Alcohol.
Yep. Alcohol is a poison. Poisons your brain and your body, so that would make total sense.
So Sempner goes on to say, a lot of the ideas that have come up over the years have centered around the fact that Poe could not handle alcohol. Dang it, hang on, an ad popped up. It's like an inescapable ad. Okay, I found it. So I'm just going to start. A lot of the ideas that have come up over the years have centered around the fact that Poe could not handle alcohol. It's been documented that after a glass of wine, he was staggering drunk.
I wonder if he had a medical condition that made him even more susceptible to alcohol like that.
Well, Sempner says his sister had the same problem. It seems to be something hereditary. So,
boing.
Could be something. But months before his death, Poe became a vocal member of the temperance movement, eschewing alcohol, which he'd struggled with all his life. Biographer Susan Archer Talley Weiss recalls in The Last Days of Edgar A. Poe an event toward the end of Poe's time in Richmond that might be relevant to theorists who prefer a death by drinking demise for Poe. Poe had fallen ill in Richmond, and after making a somewhat miraculous recovery, was told by his attending physician that another such attack would prove fatal. Now, according to Weiss, Poe replied that if people would not tempt him, he would not fall, suggesting that the first illness was brought on by a bout of drinking.
The fall of the House of Poe.
Yeah. So I'm guessing it was he just had alcohol sickness, poisoning of some kind, and they're like, you do that again, you'll die. And he's like, well, if people didn't tempt me.
I thought you were saying people blamed him for his alcohol, and I don't know.
Oh, no. Well, it lends credence to it,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Those around Poe during his final days did seem convinced that the author indeed fell into that temptation, drinking himself to death. And as his close friend J.P. Kennedy wrote on October 10th, 1849, on Tuesday last, Edgar A. Poe died in a town here at the hospital from the effects of a debauch. which is a great way of saying
A
he
debauch.
got rowdy.
A
He
debauch.
got rowdy. He fell in with some companion here who seduced him to the bottle, which it was said he had renounced some time ago. The consequence was fever, delirium, and madness, and in a few days a termination of his sad career in the hospital. Poor Poe! A bright but unsteady light has been awfully quenched. That was the quote from his buddy, J.P. Kennedy.
Wow.
1849. Though the theory that Poe's drinking led to his death fails to explain his 5-day disappearance or his second-hand clothes on October 3rd, it was nonetheless a popular theory propagated by Snodgrass after Poe's death. Snodgrass, a member of the temperance movement, also gave lectures across the country, blaming Poe's death on binge drinking. Modern science, however, has thrown a wrench into Snodgrass's talking points. Samples of Poe's hair from after his death show low levels of lead, explains Sempner, which is an indication that Poe remained faithful to his vow of sobriety up until his demise. So, they're saying they didn't find evidence that he was drinking. How crazy is that?
Very crazy.
So, another little theory we got here is carbon monoxide poisoning.
Whoa.
And here's, so in 1999, public health researcher Albert Donnet argued that Poe's death was a result of carbon monoxide poisoning from coal gas that was used for indoor lighting during the 19th century. Donnet took clips of Poe's hair and tested them for certain heavy metals that would be able to reveal the presence of coal gas. The test was inconclusive, leading biographers and historians to largely discredit this theory. So, there's that. Are you okay?
Yeah, I was just looking up a word I was trying to say, but
Well,
I'll say it in a minute.
Okay. Well, that was it for carbon monoxide
Wait.
poisoning.
What causes... Never mind.
That's like if you left your car running in the garage.
Yeah.
So another one, however, is heavy metal poisoning, which is pretty just cool sounding, heavy metal, So while Donnet's test didn't reveal levels of heavy metal consistent with carbon monoxide poisoning, the tests did reveal elevated levels of mercury in his system months before his death. According to Sempner, what?
I was going to say, did he like sushi? He was in Baltimore.
Yeah, he may have just ate a whole bunch of fish.
Have some crabs.
The crab cakes are phenomenal.
He died of crabs 2 ways.
Yeah.
No, I'm just
True.
kidding.
No, but according to Sempner, Poe's mercury levels were most likely elevated as a result of a cholera epidemic that he'd been exposed to in July of 1849 while in Philadelphia.
Didn't all of his wives die of cholera? Both of his cousins he married?
I'm not sure
what?
which of his blood relatives that he married.
No. I thought he married his cousin Mary and she died. Oh, tuberculosis maybe.
Yeah, maybe TB.
Or,
But
something.
The prescription for cholera was calomel or mercury chloride. So mercury poisoning, Sempner says, could help explain some of Poe's hallucinations and delirium before his death. However, the levels of mercury found in Poe's hair, even at their highest, are still 30 times below the level consistent with mercury poisoning.
His hair?
Yeah, that was how they...
So that's how they...
That was how they were testing for the heavy metals. But check this out. Number 6. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This one's kind of interesting. Rabies.
Was it a bat?
A rabid raven, nevermore.
Quoth the rabid raven. Nevermore.
So in 1996, the cardiologist R. Michael Benitez was participating in a clinical pathologic conference where doctors are given patients, along with a list of symptoms, and instructed to diagnose and compare with other doctors, as well as the written record. The symptoms of the anonymous patient, E.P., quote, a writer from Richmond, quote, were clear. E.P. had succumbed to rabies. According to E.P.'s supervising physician, J.J. Moran, which you'll remember that's the guy who was the physician for Edgar Allan Poe.
Right.
And we're using E.P. as like an acronym because this was like an anonymous test that these doctors were doing. E.P. had been admitted to a hospital due to lethargy and confusion. Once admitted, E.P.'s condition began a rapid downward spiral. Shortly, the patient was exhibiting delirium, visual hallucinations, wide variations in pulse rate, and rapid, shallow breathing.
Did he have any
4 days,
bites?
Huh?
Did he have any bite marks? Huh.
It's not written anywhere. Within 4 days, the median length of survival after the onset of serious rabies symptoms, E.P. was dead. E.P., which Dr. Benitez soon found out, wasn't just any author from Richmond. It was Edgar Allan Poe, whose death the Maryland cardiologist had diagnosed as a clear case of rabies, a fairly common virus in the 19th century. Running counter to any prevailing theories at the time, Benitez's diagnosis ran in the September 1996 issue of the Maryland Medical Journal. As Benitez pointed out in his article, without DNA evidence, it's impossible to say with 100% certainty that Poe succumbed to the rabies virus. There are a few kinks in the theory, including no evidence of hydrophobia, which, as you know...
Yeah, I actually forgot about that.
Yeah.
Because I was just in my head trying to think if I've ever heard a story of someone having rabies, and I just picture like raging zombies from movies because of the like aggression, but I forgot about the fear of water.
But apparently Poe was drinking water at the hospital until his death. So
what a wild symptom.
Yeah. And there wasn't any evidence of an animal bite, although some with rabies don't remember being bitten by an animal. So,
do you always have to be bitten by an animal?
I believe it is a saliva transfer, saliva to blood.
What if he kissed a raccoon?
If there was blood, then maybe.
I thought you said, oh, okay.
Saliva to blood.
Yeah.
Still, at the time of the article's publication, Jeff Jerome, curator of the Poe House Museum in Baltimore, agreed with Benitez's diagnosis. This is the first time since Poe died that a medical person looked at Poe's death without any preconceived notions, Jerome told the Chicago Tribune in October of 1996. If he knew it was Edgar Allan Poe, he'd think, oh yeah, drugs and alcohol, and that would influence his decision. But Dr. Benitez had no agenda.
So it was completely an unbiased assessment.
Yeah, basically. Like, he just had the initials and the symptoms.
Gotcha.
And the charts or whatever. So, one of the most recent theories about Poe's death suggests that the author succumbed to a brain tumor, which influenced his behavior before his death. When Poe died, he was buried, rather unceremoniously, in an unmarked grave in a Baltimore graveyard. 26 years later, a statue honoring Poe was erected near the graveyard's entrance. Poe's coffin was dug up, and his remains were exhumed in order to be moved to the new place of honor. But more than 2 decades of buried decay had not been kind to Poe's coffin.
And he probably wasn't preserved very well if he was just a nobody they were throwing in a hole.
Yeah, no.
Probably
it
not
also
even
wasn't kind to the corpse within the coffin. And the apparatus fell apart as soon as the workers tried to move it from one part of the graveyard to another.
Oh, man.
So everything
was just
crumbled.
kind of, yeah.
Little remained of Poe's body, But one worker did remark on a strange feature of Poe's skull, a mass rolling around inside.
No way.
Yeah. Newspapers of the day claimed that the clump was Poe's brain, shriveled yet intact after almost 3 decades in the ground.
I don't know how I feel about
like
that.
Like a little maraca.
I was thinking a bullet that he got shot and nobody knew who was shot or something.
Could be. It isn't.
Could be. It isn't. Okay, Jake.
We know today that the mass could not be part of Poe's brain.
Okay.
Which is one of the first parts of the body to rot after death.
That's good to know.
Yeah, good to know. Maybe that's why the mummies would
slurp it out. Ooh, we should do an episode about what people did to mummies.
Mm-hmm. You should mummify me live.
Didn't our cousins mummify a chicken?
I don't know, and I hate that thought.
I'm gonna ask our aunt. I'm gonna ask her. I think they did.
After it died?
I just remember one of my cousins telling me for her homeschool thing she was mummifying a chicken because I was really obsessed with ancient Egypt growing up. And I don't know if that actually happened, but that would be a really cool story.
I don't know. I don't know about if that happened.
Okay.
But so check this out. Matthew Pearl, who is an American author who wrote the novel about Poe's death, was nonetheless intrigued by this clump. He contacted a forensic... What?
The clump.
The clump.
The clump.
Yeah. Poe's last poem. The clump. So yeah, this dude, Matthew Pearl, contacted a forensic pathologist who told him that while the clump couldn't be a brain, it could be a brain tumor, which can calcify after death into hard masses.
Yeah.
So according to Sempner, Pearl isn't the only person to believe that Poe suffered from a brain tumor. A New York physician once told Poe that he had a lesion on his brain that caused his adverse reactions to alcohol.
That is what I was looking up on my phone because I watched an episode of Grey's Anatomy and I was trying to think of what this girl...
A lesion?
No, well... Yeah, so basically it was an episode and she would have one sip of alcohol and all her friends in college were saying she was making it up, that she was as drunk as she got. And I was trying to think, I was like, what did she have? And it was a brain tumor.
Oh.
Or, it was like a brain lesion or a brain tumor. And so she acted like she was drunk all the time when she wouldn't drink. And if she had like one sip of alcohol, she was like wasted. So that's what I was looking up earlier. I was like, what was that?
Interesting.
I changed my answer. I think this one's a really good idea. Or, I think this is really plausible as well. Do you lose it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that episode was really cool because I'm pretty sure she did gymnastics. And it caused her to be, have hallucinations. She was, wobbly and dizzy. Everyone thought she was a lush.
Oh, yeah. Well... It had to be true.
Because Grey's Anatomy is
Grey's Anatomy.
I'm pretty sure they do the research and it's all real medical things and they use correct terminology and everything and symptoms and things.
There's another medical theory. It's kind of far less sinister, but it suggests that Poe merely succumbed to the flu, which might have turned into deadly pneumonia on his deathbed. As Sempner explains, in the days leading up to Poe's departure from Richmond, the author visited a physician complaining of illness. And here's a quote from Sempner. His last night in town, he was very sick, and his soon-to-be wife noted that he had a weak pulse, a fever, and she didn't think he should make the journey to Philadelphia. He visited a doctor, and the doctor also told him not to travel, that he was too sick. So, I mean, yeah, you were bringing up that you can totally just trip out when you're feverish and hallucinating like that.
Yeah, your fever gets high enough. That would kind of explain the wearing someone else's clothes and everything. My son one time had a fever and he was talking about the Great American Baking Show. And he was like, that's the prettiest cake I've ever seen. And I was like, what on earth are you talking about? It actually scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And they do. They look drunk. Their eyes glaze over.
Mm.
Their fever's so high that
It could be.
that could explain a lot of the behaviors. And you could say names of people like you don't even know.
Well, according to newspaper reports from the time, it was raining in Baltimore while Poe was there, which Sempner thinks could explain why Poe was found in clothes that weren't his. He says, the cold and the rain exasperated the flu he already had, and maybe that eventually led to pneumonia. The high fever might account for his hallucinations and his confusion.
Wow. Which
I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. I wonder what they used for fever reducer in this time period.
Probably
we can just pop a good old Advil. Just go to the opium den.
Yeah.
If you have a fever.
So now, one of the ones I'm most excited, well, I'm not excited, but number 9, final number 9, murder. Yeah. So check this out. In his 2000 book, Midnight Jury, The Mysterious Death of Edgar Allan Poe, author John Evangelist Walsh presents yet another theory about Poe's death. That Poe was murdered by the brothers of his wealthy...
The brother of his wealthy...
The brother of his wealthy fiancée. Sarah Elmira Shelton.
Ooh.
Using evidence from newspapers, letters, and memoirs, Walsh argues that Poe actually made it to Philadelphia, where he was ambushed by Shelton's 3 brothers, who warned Poe against marrying their sister. Frightened by the experience, Poe disguised himself in new clothes, accounting for, in Walsh's mind, his secondhand clothing, and hid in Philadelphia for nearly a week before heading back to Richmond to marry Shelton. Shelton's brothers intercepted Poe in Baltimore, Walsh is theorizing, beat him, and forced him to drink whiskey, which they knew would send Poe into a deathly sickness. Walsh's theory has gained little traction amongst Poe historians or book reviewers. Edwin J. Barton, a review for the journal American Literature, called Walsh's story only plausible, not wholly persuasive. And Midnight Jury is interesting and entertaining, he concluded, but its value to literary scholars is limited and oblique. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of always the one to believe the crazier theory. I tend to lean...
I do too.
Conspiratorial.
I would say I do as well.
Yeah. For Sempner, however, none of the theories fully explain Poe's curious end. He even says, I've never been completely convinced of any one theory, and I believe Poe's cause of death resulted from a combination of factors. His attending physician is our best source of evidence. If he recorded on the mortality schedule that Poe died of phrenitis, Poe was most likely suffering from encephalitis or meningitis, either of which might explain his symptoms. So, that, I mean, if you want to get to just the real encephalitis, meningitis.
I would prefer to lean on the side of mystery.
Of murder.
Of murder.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that he wasn't murdered. His fiction has brought such joy to so many people. It would be sad if he was murdered.
The universe did not give us the literary genius and mystery and paranormal and spooky and macabre person of Edgar Allan Poe just to rip him away with meningitis.
Or maybe it did.
No, Jacob. It had to be something. I think, and I want the Maccabees to let us know what you think, either on our Discord, our Twitter, Instagram, or actually you can even comment on this Spotify. Tell us what you think it is. I'm really in favor of I think a brain tumor wouldn't be too hard to believe.
Yeah, brain tumor. I mean, but also like the rabies.
What is that? The cobbers? Coopings?
Yeah, the Cooping story sounds pretty convincing as well.
Sounds pretty realistic as well.
Or do you think it could be a combination of a couple of them?
Hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
He had the flu. His fiance's family didn't like him. He goes. When they hit him, they rupture a brain aneurysm. He goes and changes into somebody else's clothes. He falls into the mouth of a raccoon with rabies. And then he gets mugged and is forced to vote for other people. And then he dies.
Meanwhile, his rabid brain is just calling out for Reynolds.
No, it's because he had the foresight to predict Reynolds rap. Some of the greatest saran wrap there ever was produced.
That is true. That's really inspiring to think that he was thinking of that in his last days.
Well, I'd like to think he could tell the future.
Yeah. In a way he could, because we're still reading his stuff.
Yeah, he could tell the future in a way that he was like, if I write this, I will go down in history.
Right.
And so will Reynolds rap. Saran wrap.
Yeah. So let us know what you think, folks. I know what I think, but I'm curious what you think. And be sure to listen to us, however you're listening to us, please give us some ratings, share with your friends. We really enjoy coming and talking to you.
Yep. The best way to support us, if you're listening on Apple or Amazon or Spotify, is just give us a 5-star rating, and it tremendously helps us, and it's 100% free to you, but it means the world to us, and it really helps our page so we can keep coming back week after week with stories.
Yes.
And we'd love some suggestions. I know I'm doing my series right now, and Jake's bringing the spooky stories, and I'm bringing you true crime around the world. But we're seriously always open to some cool suggestions. We've already got a few from some people I think we'll cover.
Yeah, I've got one that I'm really digging that somebody suggested to me. That I'm going to look up more and more.
That's fantastic. Yep. Yeah. Next week's episode is going to be coming to you from me, and I'm going to be covering Oklahoma. So that's the next state on my list of true crime around the world. So you'll have to tune in for that, because my entire in-laws family basically lives in Oklahoma.
Yes.
And I got some spookies.
So. Exciting.
All right. Thanks for listening to us this week, and I hope you guys have a macabre Monday.
Yes. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.